of these girls were broken. She had been sexually assaulted as a child, and many of the other girls had too. Some people might think, okay, why don't you just run away? That's the response of a normal, healthy individual, but it's not the response of a broken girl. A broken girl might think, oh, right, this is what I deserve. This is who I am. This is what is expected of me. I'm not worth much.
Caroline Overington is the Australian's literary editor, and she's joining me to talk about Nobody's Girl, the book by Virginia Roberts Giuffre. Caroline, you've read it. It's only been out for a day. You must have ripped through it. What did you think as a piece of literature?
It's compelling. She has a ghostwriter, and that ghostwriter came out to Australia to work with her on the book. It would seem to me that they had intense, long, passionate and powerful conversations, which are now part of the book, because you couldn't get this level of detail without being prepared to really crack open your history, your heart, your soul.
I think most people know one thing about Virginia Giuffre, which is that she is the woman who accused Prince Andrew of having sex with her when she was just 17 years old. In the book, she goes into a little bit more detail about Prince Andrew. Let's talk about that first. How does she describe her encounters with him?
She was already by then one of the girls that was hanging around Jeffrey Epstein, who we now all know was a pedophile, sex-obsessed. When the FBI and others raided his mansion in Palm Beach, they found literally thousands and thousands of photographs of underage girls and very young women in states of undress. I think, from memory in the book, 2 rubbish bins full of sex toys. He was obsessed with sex. All of the halls of the mansion were decorated with photographs of women in sexual positions, that kind of thing. Virginia was already one of the girls on his roster, if you will. She had been plucked off, not off the street, but out of her workplace by Ghislaine Maxwell to service him. And as part of that, one of her roles was to also entertain wealthy men. And Prince Andrew, it would seem, from the testimony in this book, was one of those. She says she met him and had sex with him on 3 separate occasions, and she was 17 at the time. On each occasion, she describes in some detail what it was like to meet him. I was particularly touched, or maybe even readers will be traumatised to hear about the first meeting, because she was so excited. Ghislaine had said to her, "You're going to meet a prince today. Wake up, sleepyhead, you're going to meet a prince today," and had picked out some quite sophisticated outfits for her to wear. But because Virginia was such a young girl, she wanted to pick her own clothes. And you've seen that famous photo of her standing there in the sparkly jeans and the top. The sparkly jeans, I didn't know this, but apparently it's an interlocking horse pattern. And she thought that would be something just like her idol Christina Aguilera would wear. So that's why she was wearing those jeans and not something more sophisticated. She thought, no, I want to be cool when I meet the prince. And she had a little Kodak snap camera, and thanks goodness she did, because you and I and people our age will remember that when you took your film in to be developed, they stamped the back with the date. And so we know exactly how old she was when that photo was taken.
I've read an extract from the book where she describes working in the spa at Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump's resort in Florida, when Ghislaine Maxwell came in and sort of spotted her. She was only a receptionist at the spa, but she had a dream of being a masseuse. Ghislaine implied that she could train her, that she could be a private masseuse. And then before she knew it, she was at Jeffrey Epstein's house. He was completely naked, and that was her first encounter with him, ostensibly there to give him a massage. Of course, that's not what unfolded. She really depicts Ghislaine Maxwell also as a villain, or maybe the primary villain in this book, doesn't she?
I wouldn't go so far as to say the primary villain, but she is in prison. So, of course, prosecutors and the courts agree with you that she was a serious player in the abuse. The important thing to remember, I think, is there's a lot of confusion about Virginia's story. How did she end up in that situation? Why didn't she leave? at a certain point she was an adult, and yet she continued to fly on Epstein's private plane, live in his mansion, take advantage of the wealth and the trappings that were available to him. She admits all that in the book. But what is key is that all of these girls were broken. She had been sexually assaulted as a child, and many of the other girls had too. And so she had spent some time in foster care. She had spent some time in what we call juvie, in delinquent care. All of these girls were desperate in a way for affection. And people who Epstein surrounded himself with were able to prey on that. So when she was working at Mar-a-Lago as a young receptionist, hoping to become a masseuse, she's easy pickings because somebody comes along and says, oh, well, I know a really wealthy man. He's really, he's really into massage. Why don't you come to his house? She arrives there. Now, some people might think, okay, well, she goes into the massage room. She starts to give him a massage. Then he turns over and it's apparent that he's completely naked and expecting to have sex with her. Why don't you just run away? That's the response of a normal, healthy individual, but it's not the response of a broken girl. A broken girl might think, oh, right, this is what I deserve. This is who I am. This is what is expected of me. I'm not worth much. And then go ahead and do it. And then once you've done it once, well, you might as well do it again because it's just confirming who you are, what you think of yourself. That's what I think is really valuable about this book, how it explains what it's like to live like that.
I think that's one of the big revelations and understandings that society's come to in the past maybe 10 or 20 years, that often victims of pedophilia or sexual assault or domestic violence are re-victimised because they find themselves in dangerous situations. They have difficulty extracting themselves from trouble. They are often drawn to people who are dangerous and who want to harm them. And often they don't have a figure in their lives who can protect them. One of the heartbreaking things about that first encounter with Jeffrey Epstein is that her father drives her to his house, and then Ghislaine Maxwell very effectively gets rid of the dad. You know, they knew what they were doing. They were practiced predators, these people. Of course, Ghislaine Maxwell has always denied any wrongdoing. But Virginia Giuffre wrote this book and then took her own life. And I've read the co-author saying to her, I want this story to be out there in the event of my death. When you're reading it, do you have a sense of her almost speaking from beyond the grave, like almost that she knew that she wouldn't be around for long?
When I was reading it, I kept thinking to myself, because parts of it are so traumatic, and I know that that is going to be a difficulty for the publisher because people will think, well, why do I want to read something that's so traumatic? Why do I want to read a memoir of abuse? But when I was reading it, it was a bit bizarre, Claire, because I kept thinking to myself, oh, it's okay, she's going to be fine. But of course she's not fine. She's no longer with us. One of the things that happens in the book is they send her to Thailand, where massage is a proper profession, and there are courses that you can do at very glamorous locations where you can be taught to be a better massage therapist. While she's there, she meets an Australian man, and he is the most Australian character you've ever heard in your life. He's just terrific, and she latches onto him with wild haste. They're married within 10 days of meeting. She stays with him for 20 years and they have 3 children together. When her daughter is born, she starts to think about life or the world for young girls, and that's when she starts to speak out about what happened to her when she was very young. I got the sense that she was reasonably safe while she felt she was a mum and a wife and she was doing good works. When the marriage failed and there were issues about custody, she began to fall apart. And that's not an uncommon trajectory. I should say that I have seen a bit of reporting similar to Jeffrey Epstein. Is it possible that she didn't take her own life? Now, her family says she did, and the publisher says she did, and it is quite clear that she had a very troubled relationship with herself. But there are people who, like Jeffrey Epstein, say, well, isn't it interesting that yet another person in the Epstein files story connected to all of these famous and wealthy characters. Like, we know that Bill Gates was on that plane. We know that Bill Clinton was on that plane. We know that all kinds of celebrities from Hollywood visited that island.
Yes, but not necessarily that they were abusers, just that they were
correct
in Epstein's circle.
In this orbit of depravity. And the people who are speaking out keep being found dead. And I think we live in a time of conspiracy theory, no question. And these ideas can take flight on the internet without there being any basis. But I do think it's interesting that some people are anxious about the fact that she took her own life. What was it that prompted that?
Caroline, let's talk about Prince Andrew. He was 41 when she was 17 years old at the time that she says they had sex. Of course, he's denied any wrongdoing. His two daughters were roughly the same age as her, something that he said to her at their first encounter, which is chilling. He has gradually been stripped of his privileges. The Queen had a go at it when he first embarrassed himself with an interview with the UK programme Newsnight a few years ago.
Do I regret the fact that he has quite obviously conducted himself in a manner unbecoming? Yes.
Unbecoming? He was a sex offender.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm being polite, in the sense that he was a sex offender. But no.
And now the humiliation is almost complete. Prince Charles has ordered him to stop using the title Duke of York and His Royal Highness, even though those titles haven't actually been taken away. It's clear now that Charles the King and Prince William regard Andrew and this story as an existential threat to the monarchy, I would say. What's your instinct about what will happen now to Andrew? Do you think he'll be kicked out of Royal Lodge, where he's lived for free for a very long time, maybe have to leave the UK altogether, or is this kind of the end of it?
You know, it is fair to say that they probably do see him as a threat to the monarchy, but I think it's more than that. I think that anybody who reads this account will be appalled at a human level. And it could well be that William, who's a young father himself and the father of a girl himself, may well regard this as beyond the pale, even for your uncle. Another question I think is probably worth asking is, why does the brother of the king have such special privileges anyway? I mean, I think it's a matter for the British public, obviously, but I guess it makes sense when Andrew was in line for succession, but he's so far down the line now because you have the king and then you have William and then you have William's children, boys and girls. And yeah, so you have all of these other people cascading down before you get to Andrew. I don't think it would do much harm to the monarchy to chop him. It might do a lot of harm to keep him, and that may be the calculation they're making. But I wouldn't rule out a calculation made purely on humanitarian grounds as well, that at a certain point you look around at your dodgy uncle and you just think, oh, yeah, nah.
Even though he has paid £12 million to Virginia Giuffre in an out-of-court settlement, although he's always denied any wrongdoing, this was still a risky book for Penguin to publish, wasn't it? I mean, this is full of allegations about people, including Virginia Giuffre's own father, who are denying having done anything wrong. What do you think the calculus was there for Penguin? This could have flopped for them or could have gone catastrophically wrong.
Part of me wants to think that they thought it was an important book to publish. I think it was an important book to publish. I can accept that not everybody will want to read it, but I do think it's a very valuable resource, particularly when we're thinking about what it means to live in the world as a survivor of sexual abuse, because that's such a common thing for women too. You know, many women don't get to adulthood without having some sort of sexual activity that they don't want forced upon them. So it's valuable from that point of view. I don't think that these allegations could be published against Australians in Australia. I really don't. I think if you said the kind of things that are being said about some of the characters in this book in this country, you would be sued for defamation and the book would be pulped. The law is slightly different in the US, where they have freedom of the press and freedom of speech enshrined in the Constitution. We don't. And so there's simply no way you could publish a book like this in Australia.
Caroline Overington is the Australian's literary editor. Thanks, Caroline.
Thank you.